Good day. Welcome back to First Take. Shedeur Sanders opened up on Monday about reports that his son should
You did all of this stuff. None of it's happening. The quarterback that is there is the QB. You'll have Shedeur Sanders as QB1 with Deshaun Watson as the backup.
So the problem for you, Mr. Jason Lloyd, is everything that you're saying, there are all pros and pros that break down film that can refute what you're saying, and we can see it. You kind of acting like the government right now.
What are you watching in film that refutes what I'm saying?
Something unusual has been unfolding around Shedeur Sanders, and anyone paying close attention can feel the shift in the conversation. For months, a certain narrative about the young quarterback seemed to dominate sports media. Week after week, different commentators repeated the same doubts about him. They questioned whether he was truly ready for the spotlight, whether he had the right attitude to lead a team, and whether his confidence sometimes crossed the line into arrogance. The discussion rarely changed.
Here it says on the Cleveland Dogs podcast, the Browns QB1 is Shedeur Sanders' job to lose. One thing is, they did not sign any of the top free agents, Malik Willis, Kyler Murray, Tua Tagovailoa. Plus, no prospect in this class will be presumed ahead of Shedeur on the depth chart. Plus, Deshaun Watson hasn't played consistently good football or consistently been on the field since 2020. Any trade for a QB would be a late-round flyer at best, a la Anthony Richardson. Shedeur Sanders is the guy for 2026, okay?
Just set the record straight about playing against Shedeur Sanders. He also talked about the hostile environment that's surrounded by Shedeur Sanders fans, being in that stadium, and much more. We're going to talk about all the things that he stated in this video. So once again, as I said before, Tennessee Titans defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons just set the record straight about facing off against a young rookie, a young buck. In fact, although he did talk a little noise during this podcast, he's just pretty much stamped.
It was the same talking points appearing on television shows, sports radio programs, and online debates. At first, many fans accepted those claims without questioning them, because that is often how the sports media cycle works. When the same idea gets repeated often enough, it starts to sound like a confirmed truth even when the evidence behind it is unclear. But something interesting happened once fans began looking closer at the situation. Instead of simply listening to what commentators were saying, people started comparing those claims with actual examples from inside the football world.
But the same people, I'm not calling you a liar. Let that be known. I believe you with what you say. It concerns me when you say these things. But I think from a lot of the same folks, and I don't talk to as many around the league as you do. That's given. Your career's longer than mine. You've done more traveling than me. But I've not heard it to that degree. I've heard concerns. The not knowing how to watch film thing, that's been something we've talked about. That's been something that's been discussed on this show. Anthony and me, you and me, Danny and me, Daryl and me, Lance Riesland and me. It doesn't matter. It's been discussed.
The problem people have when they talk about Shedeur Sanders is there's an educated guess going on. But when you are definitive as if it's the worst thing you've ever seen, he can't do this, he can't do that.
I have a problem
That's
with
a
that.
yes.
I have a problem with
That is a yes.
They began listening to interviews with teammates, watching practice footage, and paying attention to what players who shared the locker room with Sanders were saying. As soon as that comparison started happening, the narrative became less certain.
Well, I think it's the correct reaction. I think it's a coach, it's a father defending his son, understanding what he heard, understanding that the Sanders name has kind of been slandered, especially during the pre-draft process, and everybody's trying to figure out post-draft why Shedeur Sanders slid. Here's what I'll say though. I think some of this stuff wasn't made up.
The story that had been repeated for months suddenly didn't look as solid as it once did. One of the moments that really changed the tone of the discussion happened on sports radio when fans began calling in and directly challenging the hosts who had been pushing those criticisms. Normally, sports talk shows follow a predictable pattern. Analysts give their opinions, callers react briefly, and the show moves on. But this time the callers came prepared with specific questions. They wanted to know why the public narrative sounded so negative when many of the players inside the locker room were saying something completely different. Instead of debating vague rumors, the callers started pointing to real examples that didn't match the storyline being repeated on air. This is where the conversation started becoming uncomfortable for some of the commentators. If a young quarterback is truly creating problems within a team, you would expect the people closest to the situation to show signs of concern. But several respected players seem to be expressing the opposite. Take Myles Garrett, one of the most respected defensive leaders in the league. Garrett has built a reputation not only as an elite player but also as a thoughtful voice within his team. When he speaks about leadership and team culture, people tend to listen carefully. Garrett has openly acknowledged the confidence and presence Sanders brings into the team environment. Those kinds of comments carry weight because they come from someone who experiences the daily reality inside the locker room. Another key voice supporting Sanders has been Denzel Ward. Ward is another respected figure on the roster and someone who understands the importance of team chemistry. According to Ward, Sanders brings a positive energy to practices and meetings. His confidence, rather than being a distraction, seems to motivate teammates around him. When multiple players inside the organization express similar opinions, it naturally makes people question why the outside narrative sounds so different. The gap between those perspectives became the heart of the debate. On one side were media personalities who continued repeating concerns about Sanders' maturity and focus. On the other side were players who actually shared the field with him, describing a completely different version of the young quarterback. Once fans started noticing that disconnect, they began asking a simple but powerful question: who should people believe, the commentators discussing the team from a distance or the players experiencing it firsthand? Another moment that added fuel to the debate involved comments from former coach and analyst Rex Ryan. Ryan had suggested during one broadcast that Sanders needed to demonstrate stronger engagement during team meetings by sitting closer to the front. At first, that criticism sounded like an insider observation. But shortly afterward, video clips began circulating online showing Sanders already sitting in the front row during those very meetings. Once fans saw the footage, the reaction was immediate. People began wondering how that criticism had even started if the visual evidence showed something entirely different. Moments like that didn't necessarily prove that every criticism about Sanders was false, but they did make people more skeptical about the reliability of the stories being repeated. Fans started realizing that narratives can sometimes form quickly in the media world, especially when a player attracts a lot of attention. Sanders entered professional football with a massive spotlight already on him. His confidence, style, and famous football background meant that every action would be examined closely. That level of attention can be beneficial when performances are strong, but it can also create situations where small moments get exaggerated into major headlines. The conversation became even more complicated when respected analysts began offering their own evaluations of Sanders' performance. Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner spent time breaking down Sanders' film and discussing his mechanics, decision-making, and leadership potential. Warner's opinion usually carries significant credibility because of his long experience both as a player and as a film analyst. When he praised certain aspects of Sanders' game, many fans assumed that evaluation would help balance the discussion. Instead, the reaction from some critics raised new questions. Rather than engaging with Warner's analysis, some commentators dismissed it by arguing that Warner was not physically inside the team's locker room every day. That response created an interesting contradiction. When anonymous sources shared negative rumors about Sanders, those claims were often treated as reliable information. But when a Hall of Fame quarterback publicly praised his abilities after studying game film, suddenly that opinion was considered less valuable. Fans quickly noticed the inconsistency in how different types of information were being treated. As these examples kept appearing, the conversation gradually shifted away from Sanders himself and toward a larger issue within sports media. People began discussing how narratives around athletes are formed and who actually controls them. In today's sports environment, stories can spread incredibly fast. A single comment from a commentator can be repeated across multiple platforms, turning speculation into something that feels like established fact. But once fans begin examining those claims more carefully, the entire narrative can change. That shift is exactly what seems to be happening now. Instead of simply accepting every headline or rumor, fans are comparing the claims with real evidence. They are listening to what teammates say during interviews. They are watching practice clips and press conferences. They are paying attention to detailed film analysis from former players and coaches. As a result, the conversation around Sanders has become far more complex than it was just a few months ago. Another reason the debate continues to grow is the natural pressure placed on young quarterbacks in professional football. The quarterback position carries enormous responsibility, and every team hopes to find a player who can lead the franchise for years to come. Because of that pressure, young quarterbacks are often evaluated more intensely than players at other positions. Every decision they make on the field becomes part of a larger discussion about leadership and potential. Sanders is experiencing that reality right now. Supporters argue that his confidence and composure are exactly what a quarterback needs in order to succeed at the highest level. They believe his ability to handle attention and criticism shows mental toughness that will benefit him throughout his career. Critics, however, worry that the same confidence might create distractions or unrealistic expectations. Both perspectives exist within the football world, which is why the debate has remained so intense. What makes the situation particularly interesting is how quickly the tone of the discussion has changed. Not long ago, the conversation seemed dominated by skepticism about Sanders' readiness. Now, more and more voices are stepping forward to offer a different perspective. Teammates continue speaking positively about his presence. Analysts continue studying his game film and pointing out areas of potential. Fans continue comparing those observations with the stories they hear in the media. As the season continues, the spotlight on Sanders will only grow brighter. Every game, every interview, and every performance will be examined closely. If he performs well on the field, the narrative may continue shifting in his favor. If he struggles, critics will likely point to those moments as confirmation of their earlier concerns. That is the reality of being a young quarterback in the modern sports world, where perception can change almost as quickly as the scoreboard. In the end, the story surrounding Sanders has become about more than just one player. It has turned into a conversation about how sports narratives are created and how quickly they can evolve. Fans today have more access to information than ever before. They can watch interviews directly, analyze game footage themselves, and hear multiple perspectives from players and analysts. Because of that access, the audience is no longer limited to accepting a single version of events. Right now, the debate around Sanders continues to unfold in real time.